all I do is grow, grow, grow no matter what. Got growth on my mind, I could never give up. And every time I get that sinking feeling that makes me feel stuck, I just keep trying, I just keep trying, I just keep trying, I just keep trying. Alright, welcome to another math video with Miss Jones, and as promised, let's go ahead and begin with our joke of the day. Now, this one I thought was pretty funny. I had to take my glasses off so you can see how funny I think it is. So here we go. How does a hammerhead shark use a hammer? How does a hammerhead shark use a hammer? You're thinking about it? Okay, great. Well, the answer is he doesn't use it. He's a shark. Why would he? Well, let's go ahead and dive into today's math lesson. And today we are dividing decimals. We're dividing decimal numbers, okay? And so I like to always kind of get started with relating what we're learning to something that's real life, and then showing you how we can relate that concept or model that concept on a place value chart, which we do a lot in 5th grade because it's all about the place value. And then lastly, we're going to relate what we've learned to what we call the standard algorithm. And the standard algorithm is simply what some of us might know as long division. So I'm going to take 3 very important steps. I'm going to show us why we divide the way we do. I'm going to show us how to do that using a model on the place value chart. And then I'm going to show us some steps, the standard algorithm, that we can repeat once we understand the why. So let's go ahead and dive in. So again, I like to start with something that makes a lot of sense. So let's say when I was growing up, first of all, this is a muck buck. I'm gonna hold it up so you can see it. Now, obviously that's not a real dollar, but it looks more real than my last video. And this is an example of a $1 bill, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cents. So let's say when I was growing up, I was really excited when my grandmother or my mom, any one of them, gave me and my cousin some money so we can go to the corner store and get some of our favorite things. Now, so let's say in this example, we both received $1.06 to share at the corner store. Now, is that a lot of money? No, but it was enough money back then for me to get a Star Crunch, for me to get Nutty Buddy, for me to get some Lemon Heads. So I was pretty excited. But as you notice, we have 2 people that we're sharing with, and we have $1 bill and 6 pennies. So let's relate that to what we know about the base 10 numeral system. And that's just really the system we use in our math in the United States, and also with our money in the United States. So I'm going to represent my $1 by 1 whole. This is 1 whole, okay? And then I'm going to represent my 6 pennies by 6 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I have to divide this among 2 people. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this camera off and turn a different camera on. So here we go. So let's take a look. Now, before we take a quick look, here we go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a math model to help us. So if we're dividing by among 2 people, as we talked, my cousin and I at the store, I'm going to represent that by 2 circles you see here. 1, 2. Now, the first thing when we're dividing, we always start with the largest place value. And the largest amount that we had was that $1, and then we had 6 pennies. So what I'm going to do is take my $1 and think, well, how can I unbundle that or rename that to share equally with 2 people? Because I need at least 2 of them to give out to share. So what I like to do is I remember that in my base 10 examples, that 1 whole is equivalent to 10 tenths. So I'm going to get rid of that 1 whole and now have 10 tenths, and I can share those equally. So I'm going to start sharing. I get 1/10 or 1 dime. My cousin gets 1/10 or 1 dime. I get 2 tenths. My cousin gets 2 tenths. And we're going to keep sharing here and see. We're going to share until we have no more to share equally. So right now we both have 4 tenths or 40 cents. I have 5 tenths or 50 cents. My cousin has 50 cents. Now notice that I have shared out all of my tenths. So now I'm going to move to the next place value, the next largest place value, which would be my hundredths in this number. So I'm now going to begin sharing those. So I get 100. My cousin gets 100. I get 100th or a penny. My cousin gets another penny. I get a penny. My cousin gets a penny. So now you'll see that if we were to share 1 whole and 6 hundredths or $1.06, each of us would get 5 tenths and 3 hundredths. That's also the same thing as 53 hundredths or 53 cents. And that kind of makes sense, okay? That makes a lot of sense. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to relate this example to the place value chart and show us how we divide on a place value chart, because 5th grade is all about place value and understanding the size of those numbers and how to either add them, multiply them, divide them, or subtract them. So let's go ahead and take a look at our place value chart here. Just a second. Okay, so now I have a place value chart. As you can see, let me just adjust my camera a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to model it on the place value chart and relate it to the standard algorithm or to long division. So in our first example, I'm going to write my division sentence at the top. And in a division sentence, we have actually three different parts. We have our dividend, our divisor, and our quotient. Our dividend is the amount that the whole amount that we're starting with. By whole amount, I mean, in our example before, my cousin and I only had $1.06 or 1 600ths. That's the whole amount. Now, in our example, the first example we're going to do, we begin, our dividend is 6, make sure you can see that okay, 6 72 hundredths. And we're going to divide that into 3 equal groups, or we can just say among 3 people. We can pretend this is money again. We got $6.72, or we read that decimal number 6 72 hundredths. We're dividing that into 3 equal groups. So on my place value chart, the first thing I would do is I would represent, sorry, I gotta grab my whiteboard. Here we go. I would represent that example by showing 6 ones. So I'm going to draw discs or circles to represent my ones. I have 6 in the ones place, so I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ones. Now I'm going to represent my 7 in the tenths place by drawing 7 discs or 7 circles to represent my 7 tenths. And lastly, I notice that I have 2 hundredths, so I'm going to represent that by showing 2 hundredths. So because I'm sharing it by 3 equal groups, I'm going to pretend that this is group 1, group 2, and group 3. And I like to just write that on my place value chart. So this is group 1, this is group 2, and this is group 3. And I need to make sure I am sharing equally among each of these groups. So they have to have the same amount, same exact amount for each place value. So our first step is we have this set up. I'm going to show you how we would set up the standard algorithm as well. So our first step, if we're writing that standard algorithm, we would write our dividend inside here. We have 6 72 hundredths, and we're dividing it, so we have our divisor out here. Our divisor is our equal number of groups, okay? That's how we're sharing. And our quotient is going to be our answer. Okay, so now we have our standard algorithm set up. We have our place value set up. Let's go ahead and start dividing. And I'm going to go back and forth between the two so we can see what's happening. So here we go. My first step, I'm taking a look and I see that I have 6 ones. So I have 3 groups. I'm going to divide my 6 ones into 3 groups. So as I share each one, I'm going to remove it from the ones place. So I'm going to have 1 1, another 1, another 1. So I've shared 3 ones. I'm going to take those away. So now I can see I have 3 more ones to share. I'm going to share them. So each group, and I'm taking those away. So I can see in my first example, each group has 2 ones. So if I'm representing that on my place value chart, what I'd say is I have a 6 in the ones place. Each group had 2 ones. So I know that 2 groups of 3, or 2 times 3, gives me 6. And because I shared all 6 and I didn't have any 6 left over, I represent that with subtraction. My 6 minus 6 gives me 0. And as you can see, I had 0 ones remaining. Now let's go ahead and move on to our next place value. Let's look at our tens place. Again, I'm going to go ahead and share 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to take 3 away. 1, 2, 3. Keep sharing. 1, 2, 3. Now, as you notice, I actually do have 1/10 remaining. And if I put it here, then this group would have 3/10 and the other groups will have 2. Because that's not an equal amount, we've got to think about how can I keep sharing? Well, just like we did in our example with our $1, we changed our $1 into 10 tenths. Well, I also know that my 10 tenths can change into 10 hundredths. So I'm going to unbundle my 10 tenths and represent them over here as 10 hundredths so that I have enough to put into equal groups of 3. So let's do that. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now I no longer have those 10 tenths because I unbundled them and I basically traded my 10 tenths, my 1/10, excuse me, out for 10 hundredths. So now let me show you how that would work on our standard algorithm. So we have, so I shared all of my 6 ones and now I'm looking, I am going to go to my next place value. I had 7/10 remaining. So I'm asking myself, how many equal groups can I make? Well, I can make, I realize that each group could have 2, and this is what happened. I had 2 tenths in each group. So I'm going to put a 2 in the tenths place, okay? 2 groups of 3 gives me those 6 tenths. Again, I'm going to subtract all that I have used, and I have used 7 minus 6. I've used 6 of those tenths. Remember, we had the 1/10 remaining, and now I have to unbundle that, and let's see how many tenths I should have left. I should have 1, 2, 3. How many hundredths I should have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I can see I have 12 hundredths in total now to share, and in order to represent that I'm sharing my 12 hundredths, I unbundle my 1/10. Now I have 10 hundredths plus 2 hundredths gives me 12 hundredths. So now I have 12 hundredths left to share. Now let's go back to our place value chart and share those out and see how many would be in each group. So if I have 12 hundredths to share, I'm going to go ahead and share them equally into my 3 groups and should subtract 3 hundredths every time I share a hundredth. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. As you can see, I have 0 ones, 0 tenths, and 0 hundredths. I have nothing left to share. So let's see how I would represent that on my standard algorithm. I had 12 hundredths. Each group had 1, 2, 3, 4 hundredths, 4 hundredths. So I'm going to put my 4 above the hundredths place. Now I have to continue to figure out how many total hundredths I shared. 4 groups of 3 is 12 hundredths. So I shared all 12 hundredths. And you can see I have 0 remaining. Okay. So my final answer, before I write my final answer, which is my quotient, I must remember that I have to bring the decimal right up, okay? Bring the decimal up. So my final answer is 6 and 72 hundredths divided by 3 would equal 2 and 24 hundredths. And that's about right. You know, if I had about $7, okay, and I divided that by 3 people, each person would get about $2.25. A lot of times in 5th grade math, we like to ask ourselves, is our answer reasonable? The most common misconception or mistake I see is that scholars forget the decimal and they might write 224. I can easily see that 224 is an unreasonable answer because we only had 6 and 7200 to begin with, or roughly $7, okay? So that decimal matters. On our place value chart, we represent our final answer by saying that we have 2 ones. Put a 2 here. My decimal is between the ones and the tenths place. I have 2 each group, this is one group. Every group has 2 ones, 2 tenths, and 4 hundredths, okay? So that's how the standard algorithm lines up with the place value chart, okay? So we're going to try one more example. Let me clear my whiteboard here and my place value chart. Okay. Let's see if we can kind of get the hang of it. Okay. So in our next example, and this will be our final example for today, we're going to take 20 and 8 hundredths and divide that by 8. Okay, so our dividend is 20 and 8 hundredths. Our divisor is 8. So we must share that among 8 equal groups. Okay. Actually, we're going to do 20 and 8 hundredths, and I actually want to share that with 4 equal groups because I have enough room for 4 groups on this place value chart. Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and Group 4. So let's divide that by 4 here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set up my standard algorithm. Again, my dividend, the amount that I began with, is represented by placing it inside. I like to say inside of the house. You can call it whatever you'd like. We have 20 and 8 hundredths, okay? And we're dividing it into 4 equal groups. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to place a 2 in the tens place because I have 2 tens. 1, 2. I have 0 ones and 0 tenths. So I'm going to move on to represent my 8 hundredths by drawing 8 discs or circles to represent 8 hundredths. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide. And the first thing I can see right away is I have only 2 tens and I want to divide them into equal groups of 4. If I began dividing, I would run out of tens before I could divide them into equal groups of 4. So I must unbundle and regroup to the next place value. So the first thing I'll do is change this 1 10 into 10 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that has been unbundled. I'm going to remove it. I still have 1 10 remaining, so I'm going to unbundle this 10 and also change it into 10 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And again, the reason I unbundled here is because I did not have enough to begin sharing equally. If I want to represent that on my standard algorithm, the first question I would say is, ask myself is, how can I share 2 tens equally into 4 groups? Well, I can't because I only have 2. So I would say I couldn't share any. I'd write a 0 there. 0 groups of 4, 0 times 4 is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So now I have those 2 10s remaining, and remember I unbundled them, so I'm going to represent that by bringing down my 0 in the ones place. So now I have 20 ones to share. So let's see now how many ones I can share evenly. I'm going to go ahead and begin sharing to my 4 groups. And I'll just subtract 4 or erase 4 every time I share. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I can see I've evenly shared out my 20 ones, and I have, each group has 5 ones. Let's represent that on our standard algorithm. Adjust my camera here. There we go. All right, let's represent that 5 ones. Each group has 5 ones, so let's represent that on our standard algorithm. I can see that each group in my ones place had 5 ones. So 5 groups of 4 gives me 20 total ones that I shared, and I can see 0 minus 0 is 0, 2 minus 2 is 0. So now I'm going to move on to my tens place, and I'm going to see how many groups I can share. So I have 0 tenths. I have 0 tenths. How many groups can I make of 4? Well, clearly I can make 0 groups because I don't have any tenths. So 0 groups of 4 is 0. So I'm going to subtract here. And on my place value chart, because I have 0 tenths to share, that's why I brought that down and unbundled, I'll just put a 0 there. So let's keep moving. Now I'm in my hundredths place. So to represent that, I'm going to unbundle now, and I'm looking at my hundredths place, okay? So I have 8 hundredths left to share, which are represented on my place value chart. So let's go ahead and share those evenly into our 4 equal groups. 2, 3, 4. And it looks like this will work out perfectly. I've shared all my hundreds, and each group here, you can see, gets 2 hundredths. Each group gets 2 hundredths. So on my place value chart, I would say each group would have 2 hundredths, and I would place a 2 above the hundredths place. My last step, 2 groups of 4 gives me 8, or 2 times 4 gives me 8. I'm going to subtract. 8 minus 8 gives me 0. So I can see that I have nothing left to share. I have nothing left to share. And because I have nothing left to share, I would say I can go ahead and bring my decimal up to represent my quotient. So my answer or my quotient to this division problem would be 20 and 8 hundredths divided by 4 equals 5 and 2 hundredths. Now I'm asking myself, is that reasonable that 20 and 8 hundredths divided by 4 equals 5? It is reasonable. If I had about $20 and I divided it among 4 people, each person will get about $5. And that's also represented here on our place value chart. So in this lesson, scholars are going back and forth connecting those 2 concepts. To finish out our video, I just wanted to show you an example of an anchor chart that might be helpful. You might have noticed that as we worked, we continued to, sorry Scott, sorry y'all, just adjusting this camera here. You might have noticed that as we worked today, we would start from the largest place value. These are some of the key concepts we need to remember. We got to begin from that largest place value, okay? That's where we're starting our division, okay? And as we divide from that largest place value, we have to keep in mind that what we're doing is As we divide from the largest place value, we're sharing as many as we can. When we get to a point where we cannot share equally anymore, we have to unbundle to the next place value. That's going to give us more to share. And then when we have a final answer where our divisor is our answer, the number we have, for example, on this anchor chart, is smaller than our divisor, the number 1 remaining is smaller than the divisor, then that example you'll have a remainder. And in our next lesson, we'll look at how to represent a remainder when we're dividing. I hope this video was helpful. It's been a joy to do math with you today. Can't wait to see you on our next math video. Go ahead and divide. Practice, practice, practice.